The idea of retreat in a military sense happens when an army, overwhelmed by some great enemy on the battlefield, well, the army runs away.
Stop that ship! Blast them! Julie, get us out of here! Get away!
Run, Forrest! Run!
Runs away to some place of safety, sometimes to make contact with home base and get further instructions. It runs away to safety to allow its soldiers to be restored and renewed, to kind of let them catch their breath. The army runs away to a safe place in order to devise a new battle plan to go up against the enemy. Now, we also use retreat to talk about something we do in our spiritual lives. In a spiritual sense, a retreat is not that different than an army's retreat. It generally involves stepping back from whatever it is that we're ordinarily doing, going somewhere we wouldn't normally go. It might be a church, it might be a retreat center, it might be out to the mountains somewhere. We do so in hopes of making contact with home base, of deepening our connection to God. We do so in hope of allowing ourselves the opportunity to be restored and to be renewed in body and in soul. We do so in hopes of devising new plans to battle those enemies we face in the spiritual life. Retreats have been a big part of my life for 25 years, since I went on my first retreat in the spring of 1996. And this experience of going on retreats and of leading retreats for others, well, they look different. Sometimes they involve a lot of silence and reading, and sometimes sleeping. Sometimes they involve Nerf guns and pool noodles and music. Always they involve prayer, often in the context of Eucharistic adoration. Because my hope is always to go on retreat, to step back, to catch my breath, reconnect with God. Now, I bring all of this up because very soon it's going to be Ash Wednesday. And Ash Wednesday marks the beginning of Lent, what one priest has called the church's annual retreat, a time where we step back from the ordinariness of day-to-day life, a time where we're supposed to rebuild our connection with home base with God, a time to be restored and renewed, and to employ certain tools, certain tactics for the spiritual battle. Now, we hear a lot about prayer and fasting and almsgiving during this season. Prayer being our ongoing communication, our ongoing relationship with God. Fasting, the choice to sacrifice something that's good for the sake of something greater. And the need to look out for the needs of those around us by making gifts of our time, our talents, and the money that we have, our resources. When we take on these things, when we use Lent for what it's intended to be, this time to be restored, to be renewed, to return to God, to restore our relationship with God, well, it helps us to face whatever we have to face on a day-to-day basis better. Now, for years, when I've hosted retreats, I've often suggested to my students that what you get out of the time we spend together often correlates with what you put into it. Now, it's not a perfect equation, because obviously God can and often does whatever he wants to do. But in my experience, it is very rare that God shouts at us. More often, God speaks in a whisper. It is very often that God appears to try and pull us in a different direction. He waits for us to turn back to him. And so it's quite possible to go through Ash Wednesday and to go through the 40 days of Lent and to experience absolutely nothing. It's also very possible that you try and find ways to pray more. You look for something to sacrifice that's going to be a little bit hard, but you do so for the sake of your relationship with God and to get rid of these enemies of distraction, of sin, of complacency, and make more room for God in your life. And in looking for others, you learn what it is to also love your neighbor as yourself, and in doing so, do a better job of making yourself third. All of these are part of a healthy Lent. All of these are part of the retreat that we've been invited to go on, not forever, for 40 days. And I pray that you'll do just that.